the next hour, Steve Wilson from Speedway Digest. But let's talk about the Daytona 500. Great win for Denny Hamlin, and nothing to take away from that. But Ryan Newman really, really escaped death. I think he knows that, realizes that. We've seen this. This isn't anything new that we've seen at the Daytona 500. Kind of weird or spooky that it falls on the 13th anniversary of the death of Dale Sr. But a lot of credit's been given to the cage or the pit, if you will, of the race car that has been redesigned so much over the years since Dale Sr.'s passing, and that actually saved Ryan Newman's life. As we know, at the last lap, he had a wreck, hit the wall, began to flip, and then LaJoy comes and hits him right smack dab in the head, if you will. And it just didn't look good. It just didn't look good. It was so scary. And, I had a lot of friends down there. Steve was down there. And the thing about it is they were putting the black screens up. They had a stretcher by the car. They were telling media to get out of the pits. They were moving fans back away from the pits. Indications, all signs that this was not going to end well. But it did end well. And he's out of the hospital now. Amazingly, he walked out of the hospital with his $2. What a great picture that was. So this is a story with a happy ending. And another great part of this is Ryan Newman had a really we all know that Ryan Newman went to Purdue, has an engineering degree. Ryan had a big part in designing the new pit or cage or cockpit, if you will, of the current NASCAR car that they use. What are your thoughts about this Daytona 500, how it ended, and just the story about Ryan Newman? Of course, Indiana guy from South Bend, actually.
A lot of things that NASCAR's necessarily done I haven't been thrilled with, but the fact that they put the driver in a more centralized position in the car, I think really saved Ryan Newman, because he took a devastating shot on what would have been the driver's side from Corey LaJoy, and that would have probably caused massive injuries had the seat of the driver been where it was when the Earnhardt crash happened. And thankfully that was not the case. He absorbed a lot of the impact, and thankfully he is, going to be able to make a full recovery. But I just am not sure if we're going to be seeing Ryan Newman much more in the cockpit at age 42. I think this might be the scare to keep him out. And they've got an able set of hands. Ross Chastain, one of the up-and-coming prospects. Yep. I think a lot of people say a lot of future for this guy. He'll be in the 6th this weekend, Vegas. So I don't know, but maybe this will be the one where we see where Ryan Newman says, just like Rick Mears did a few years ago back in 92 when he had that flip saying, I don't need this.
Well,
I hate to say that, but it would not surprise me if he said, enough's enough, I'm done.
Yeah, and you're right. And there comes a time, and he's already a team owner, and he's already very successful in his charities and not-for-profit. So him walking away from the car, he's not walking away from the race. He's always going to be a part of the race. Ryan Newman is I've followed him for many, many years, and I've talked to him. I've got a chance to know him. I like Ryan, and he's a good guy. He's a good-hearted guy. I know he's a totally separate issue, but he recently separated from his wife. He's got his 2 daughters. I mean, we saw the same thing with Dario Franchitti when he had that horrific wreck in Texas. And, I mean, really bad. He came really close to being paralyzed. And so it's hard to get back into a car, especially after you've been racing for so many years. And you look at some of the other precious things in your life, like your kids and other things that you've got going on, that you're thinking, I've made my impact on the sport, and I can continue to make my impact on the sport. But so, I think you're right. We're probably seeing the end of Ryan Newman as a driver, but certainly his impact as an owner, as a mentor, as a not-for-profit leader. Ryan Newman is always going to be a leader, part of the sport. And it was a scary thing there for just wow. And so glad that he's feeling better. at least he's out of the hospital now. So that was a great end of that story, as we thought that it may not. NBC Sports has revealed its schedule for 2020. Obviously, for the Indianapolis 500 and the Grand Prix, a total of 8 IndyCar races. What do we know about NBC and NBC Sports and IndyCar?
Well, obviously they made a major commitment, and I think that's a part of the thing you could say where, the car count is getting in there, because the revenue from that and the fact they're going to be on national TV more and the ability to attract sponsorship, I think is helping things a great deal. And I think that's what, when Robbie Buell announced Citroen Buell, he said the timing is right to do it. So, the scenarios are good right now. We're still, 2 years away from a brand new car design and possibly a new engine partner. So it'll be very interesting to see how things go. But certainly Jay Fry and company are ticking off the right boxes right now. And, some of it has to do with Roger Penske obviously now having a controlling interest now. But I think the way IndyCar is going with the moves they have made, even before the Penske move, I think is starting to attract attention. And who knows, maybe that's not the last brand new team we see here in the next few months. Maybe a few new teams looking ahead to 2021 come into play as well.
Well, I'll tell you what, also in the funny season as well, we all know the Australian racing legend Dick Johnson is about to lose his star protege, if you will, or star student, and that's Scott McLaughlin, a 26-year-old New Zealander, and also mentored by the Iceman Scott Dixon, is playing a kind of a role in this. Looks like Scott McLaughlin's headed over to the NTT IndyCar Series as soon as next year, 2021.
Yeah, that looks like the deal, and it may be just more than IndyCar Grand Prix this year. There could be some more events, possibly as many as 7 or 8 more, possibly a run on an oval. It's not going to include the Indy 500 because Penske's already only committed to 4, and he's not going to commit an extra car. He's already been adamant about that, as has Tim Cindric, that they're not going to provide any more cars than they currently have. But, the big question is right now, is this going to become a 4-car team next year, or is it going to stay at 3? And then, of course, if it stays at 3, who's going to be the odd man out? And unfortunately, as we have said, it looks like Simon Pagenaud, if indeed we stay at 3, could be a man without a ride with Penske in 2021.
Yeah, and we'll see how all that plays out. You were talking about it a little bit. Let's go back to Pippa Mann. Pippa Mann, I like Pippa Mann. She's actually been on the show before. She's a good interview. She's a good talk. She's a good driver. But do we look at her as? Don't we just kind of look at her? It kind of feels like, it seems like we just look at Pippa Mann. Now, I want to say this carefully because I don't want to come out wrong, but we kind of look at her as a great not-for-profit pitch moment, if you will. She's great on the track. She's great to get a sponsorship for the Indianapolis 500, but is she really she's a good driver, but is she really anything more than a name and a face on the track? Does that make sense?
I'll say solid driver. I won't say great driver, and I won't say good driver. She is solid. She will get the job done for you, and she is capable of putting cars in the show as she did last year. Now, is she going to be a driver that's going to be capable of winning races? Probably not. Is she going to be a driver that's capable of, consistent top 10 finishes if she were ever to get more races? Probably not. But she has a solid set of hands. And if indeed Citroen Buell Autosport is looking for a veteran driver, that would probably be a decent pickup for them, considering they're in such late position of the game at this point of silly season, and considering now we're just less than 100 days from the Indy 500.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, she's a solid driver. She's great. She could get you some sponsors, and she's obviously did a great job with her charities. But we'll see what happens with her. Real quickly, I think maybe we touched on this a little bit last week, but let's touch on it again this week. Roger Penske, owner of IndyCar and the IndyCar and the Indianapolis Motor Speedway has announced that recently that there's an increase in the purse, which is the first time that's happened in several years. And we're also going to see an increase in speed. So let's talk a little bit about some of the changes we'll see at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway after the ownership of Roger Penske.
Well, the question is, though, how is that going to be altered with the aero screen? I don't think it's going to be altered as much as people think, where that's going to be a drop in speed, because I think the streamline of it is better than I think some people are giving credit. And add to that, I think during the test, I don't think speed was necessarily the ultimate target. I think getting consistency out of the package was getting there, and they'll figure it out. And I think with the open test, like I said, we could be talking maybe getting to Scott Dixon's 232 average that put pole for him 3 years ago maybe in play, and maybe as much as a 229 it's going to take just to make the field. And, again, it's going to be some lofty targets. But, again, we were talking a speed increase anyway with the brand-new engine package, so it's not necessarily a surprise situation. It's just maybe coming a little earlier than we would have thought it would have at this point.
Well, a $2 million increase is a pretty big increase in the purse. And, Robin Miller's talked about this many times. Like, this is the Indianapolis 500. We've got to have a purse that's more than what it is. So Roger Penske heard that. What are some of the other things that we think might be happening? Do we think that we might see lights in the future? Obviously that would come in. It would never happen with the Indianapolis 500, but it would certainly, I'm certain, would come into play with the Brickyard 400 if it manages to stay around. And that's the other thing. I mean, does NASCAR and Penske certainly have a great relationship. Everybody knows NASCAR and Penske, and IndyCar and Penske. So Roger Penske has a great working relationship with both leagues. But is there a decision to be made? Do we continue on with the Brickyard 400 at Indianapolis? We hope that they do. Certainly have fans here in the Indianapolis area. But as a business decision, if you're Roger Penske, do you continue this race with NASCAR that seems to be falling, but now with Penske being the owner, maybe he has a way to turn that around and get butts in seats in the NASCAR race?
I think if they cannot draw over 100,000 at least for the NASCAR race, I think you could be seeing it on its last legs, because the ultimate thing is how many people are getting through the gates, and right now that event is just not drawing. Now, granted, of course, that was influenced a couple of years ago by the bad weather and having it delayed all the way, I think, to Monday or Tuesday, I believe. But ultimately, you got to get the interest back going and drawing a more competitive race than these, front-running gambits that we have seen the last several years. And that just doesn't attract the fans. I think you talked about other things as well, maybe being a little more harsher about blocking, I think would be another thing, maybe to encourage more passing, because the blocking has been fierce on these restarts, and maybe that would allow for more overtaking. I don't know what the result would be, but I think there's certain ways they need to go to. Instead of just saying they're going to go to it, they need to look into it and test it out and see how it would work. I think one thing, especially after the exits at Daytona, is I think they need to be a little bit more cognizant, NASCAR is, just like IndyCar is, about enforcing blocking. I think that's another game control, because it's getting out of control. I mean, these win-at-all-cost things was kind of set in stone when Austin Dillon won the Daytona 500 a couple years ago. They did nothing after he took out Almirola, and I think you just saw that, and the hash continued. Well, they could drive as aggressively as they want. They're not going to get penalized, and I think that's why you saw the aggression there at the end of the race that eventually led to the Newman crash, is NASCAR, the drivers just think they are invincible right now, and until, the circuit sets them straight that there are certain parameters you have to race under, we're going to keep seeing these kind of accidents at the end of races, especially at Daytona and Talladega, unfortunately.
Matthew Hicks joins us here in just a moment. Here we got him in the ballot screen room. Too many Matthews. Matthew Embury, our official IndyCar contributor, WSBT up in South Bend. Matthew, we appreciate you joining us and jumping on and talking some IndyCar funny season. Do you want to stick around for a little bit, or do you got to go?
I'll give my way to my good buddy, Mr. Hicks. And don't forget, we don't have much sports today, but we do have on our sister station Z94.3 Notre Dame hockey trying to complete a series sweep at Michigan at the Yost Ice Arena against the Wolverines. Now, granted, Michigan's